.755 is real with David O'Brien and Eric O'Flaherty.
Welcome back to 755 is real. I'm David O'Brien, brace writer for The Athletic, with my co-host Eric O'Flaherty out in Seattle. I'm down here in Florida. What's up, Eric? How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you doing? How's spring training?
It's awesome, man. I got down here. It was 87 degrees the day I got down here and humid. It's like the late spring weather. So, and it was a little cold and wet when I left Atlanta, but nothing like it was up in the Northeast, obviously, or Texas. But yeah, it's been nice weather for them. They got really lucky with that. Nothing rained out yet, really, or anything. So
I miss that the most, man, with spring training. You know, living up here in Seattle, I used to get to duck out on the bad weather, like early February, late January. Now I'm in it. You know, now you stay in it the whole time. I never realized how nice that was to just get to fly down there and get in 70-degree weather in, you know, early February.
Yeah, I mean, and it got dry today because front went through, so it's cool and crisp today, relatively cool. It's like, 68 degrees. It feels great, 70 degrees. But, yeah, I can see why so many players end up, because they come down here, if they're from the Northeast or the Northwest or wherever where it's miserable in the winter, they come down here to spring training every year, and it's gorgeous. I can see why they live here, because no state income tax and the weather.
Yeah, and same with Arizona. Like whatever team you're with, you find out, a lot of guys wind up just buying a house there. They can live there for spring training and then live there all off season. I mean, so many guys live in Phoenix now. Yep.
Yeah, that valley, in the valley, you could put together a good Major League alumni squad or 10.
That'd be a fun game, Florida versus Arizona residents.
And it's like whatever team the guy was with for most of his career, it seems like they live in the place where they went to spring training. There's a bunch of guys who live down here in Florida, obviously. And then, like you said, even more live in Arizona.
Well, Arizona's way better because you can – I mean, everything's within 20, 30 minutes. If you buy a house in, where the Mets spring training is, you might have a 6-hour drive or 4-hour drive to spring training.
Well, my early impressions. Let's go over those. My early impressions from the first 4 or 5 games down here. They're playing the fifth one today after we record this. But through 4 games, my early impressions of what I've seen, and just talking to players and to Snicker 3 times a day. First of all, I now see why, along with their reduced budget, the Braves didn't emphasize bringing back the 3 free agent relievers they lost. I know they did want to bring back Melanson and Darren O'Day, and also they wanted to bring back outfielder Adam Duvall for the bench or left field if the DH was back, which is not going to be. But we found that out last night, by the way. I don't know if you saw that, but officially expanded playoffs and the DH are out for this year.
Yeah.
So, are 99% certain. But getting back to this, I understand why they didn't make it a top priority, because with the budget being what it was, they like the bunch of young arms that they've put together. Not just young arms, but some former relievers too who've had some success in the big leagues. But they really have some good young arms that people haven't really heard about because they're not ranked in the top 10 or 20 prospects. But these are guys that legitimately could help out at some point this year. And then some veteran guys like Carl Edwards Jr., Nate Jones, who've actually looked good so far in camp with good stuff. Carl Edwards Jr.'s got really good stuff.
He has good stuff.
And, they only need a couple of guys to fill out that bullpen. And one of them is Jacob Webb, who you've really liked since he came up as a rookie in 2019. And last year, he had his rookie season slowed or stopped by a impingement in his elbow. That also slowed him at the start of last year, but when he came back last year, he was the same guy, and this spring he looks really good. It's healthy.
I love his confidence. I see guys – I'm watching on TV now, but you could still, in between pitches, they zoom in on their faces, and he always looks comfortable. Even when the situation looks like it's starting to get out of hand, runners first and second, 1 out or something, tie game. You look into his eyes when they zoom in on his face, and he doesn't look like a deer in the headlights type of look. He looks like calm, controlled, and just focused. I think that's one of the biggest indicators, and that's why they do mound visits and all that stuff during the game, is more to get a read on where the guy's head's at if they need to get a reliever going or whatnot. But he always looks comfortable even when shit's hitting the fan. So for me, I've had a lot of confidence in him, and I think it's like what you're saying. They need to find out what they have in some of these young guys, and they can always add a reliever at the deadline.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think he'll be in the opening day bullpen, and I think Kyle Muller, he's shown some progress this spring. And like Snit said, it's only a matter of throwing strikes with this guy. I mean, the stuff is off the charts. It's explosive, and he's 6'7". He's obviously groomed as a starter, but with his repertoire and his troubles, kind of keeping it together for a long time, bullpen might be where he ends up. I mean, this guy looks like he could really be a force in a pen. And I think if he pitches like he did in his spring debut, I would expect to see him at some point this year too. And that could be a pretty big add at some point if he keeps making strides.
Well, you got to get in line if you want to start. There's a lot of guys ahead of him. And
exactly.
If he's got big league stuff and he's ready, I don't think he's a guy that you're too worried about starting his clock. He's not one of those guys you're thinking is going to be like a Soroka where you might want, you might want that extra year. But they got a window, right now to try to get to the World Series and win one. If they find a role where he can come up and throw, what does he throw, 96, 97 left-handed?
He's hit 100.
He's hit 100 left-handed,
yeah. He says 96, 99.
It's just insane, man. I mean, I've been watching all these clips that Pitching Ninja's putting up, and like Hunter Green's already throwing 103. These guys come into camp in such different throwing shape. They don't use it to get ready anymore. Everybody's game speed from day one. And I don't know if that's, the best thing, because you might be wasting some bullets or get tired down the road, but it's just insane seeing what guys are coming into camp doing now.
Tucker Davidson, another guy who's made progress. He's looked good so far. There's several of them. Some of the young arms that Snit has mentioned are worth taking note of, because you always know when Snit talks about a guy that he's more than in the back of his mind. He's a guy they're actively looking at. And they have a couple of guys, last year did some weird stuff to the timetable. Mm-hmm. There was no minor league season. So you look at a guy that was in A-ball last year and normally, or 2 years ago, and normally you would see a guy who hasn't been in A-ball or hasn't pitched above A-ball. You'd think, okay, he's 2 more years at least away. He's got to go AA, AAA. That's not really the case now, because they're going to speed the timetable up on some of these guys because, they're 22 years old. If they haven't pitched above A-ball, they're not going to spend a whole year in AA and a year in AAA or a year in high A. A couple of guys like Victor Vodnik is a guy that Snit's talked about several times, and we saw him pitch, and he was impressive. He had a few saves at Rome a couple of years ago in 2019, had more than a strikeout per inning, decent walk rate, and that's really improved pitching at the alternate site. He's got a real good arm. Snit likes him a lot. A guy they're going to see today in the game against the Pirates, William Woods, is a guy who put up real similar stats to Vodnik at Rome 2 years ago. 22 years old, 58 strikeouts and 51 innings at Rome, converted all 3 of his save chances. So these are just some guys that really are looking at. And again, I can see why they didn't want to have a full bullpen with nowhere to use any of these guys if they are ready at some point this year. Yeah,
and like I said, they can use those first 3 months to feel it out because they have enough depth. I mean, you got a good pen, regardless of if your question marks, exceed your expectations or fall a little short. The pen's not going to be a problem, but they got time to kind of sort it out. And if more guys struggle than they expect, then you can go get a reliever at the deadline. But I think it's weird because a lot of those guys, if you were at the alternate site last year, you were basically playing AAA. Mm-hmm. And so the experience they got could kind of speed them up. Me personally, I went from A-ball to the big leagues in a year, and it's not like you can't learn certain things in A-ball and AA that will get you there faster and get you ready. But there's nothing like even like Markakis or guys coming down or like AAA vets like Josh Tomlin, just being around them, it speeds up your learning process so much because they've already gone through all the kind of little crap you have to learn on your way. So yeah, it'll be interesting, man. I think a lot of these guys could contribute this year.
Yeah, I think it's really it's an unprecedented situation last year, and I think it hurt some position guys who would have been playing every day. A guy like Drew Waters, like their catchers who would have been playing. Well, the catchers did play every day. They caught major league pitchers that were down there, too. So I think with some guys like relief pitchers, like you just said, you went from A ball to the big leagues. I think last year might have helped some of them more than it would have been going out and pitching a bunch of innings in A ball. They were facing guys that were down on rehab, or guys that have played in the big leagues, that were fringe guys that the Braves might have needed, or top prospects. Yeah. All the Braves' top prospects were down there, so they faced better hitters than they would have faced at Rome.
Yeah, and you can have flaws in. You could be an A ball, and if you throw 96 and you have a big curveball, you can get by with it. But if your curveball, when you go to throw, if it doesn't come out on the same plane as your fastball, if it pops up, those hitters at the lower levels are still going to be overwhelmed by it, where you're not going to get that feedback that this pitch isn't good enough. But you go try to throw that in AAA, and you got guys that are seasoned and they've seen it over and over. They'll pick up on that curveball and shut it down the second it leaves your hand. So those are just the little things that I think, obviously you couldn't get as many guys at that alternate site, but the guys that were there, I'm sure, along with the stats not mattering. So it's almost stress-free learning experience against guys that are still trying to prove something and get onto that big league team. It's kind of a nice combo, man. I think it could help a lot of guys a lot.
Yeah, the stats didn't matter.
Right.
Pitching in front of all the team officials that were there is what mattered. So if they saw you doing things they liked, they didn't have to rely on any statistics or anything like that. And Freddie Tarnock, that's another young guy that Snickers had his eye on. He pitched live BP yesterday. It was pretty cool because normally they'd be having live BP on the backfields, but it got rained out in the morning, so they had it on the main field before the game. So some early arriving fans got to see it. I saw it, and they had like 5 or 6 pitchers go. Freddie Freeman took some live BP. First swing he took, line drive to right off Josh Tomlin.
Yeah.
But they had a bunch of young guys out there throwing, and a couple of them really stood out. And Phil Pfeiffer, the left-hander, who the Braves who DFA'd about a week and a half ago, thought they were going to lose him. He got through waivers. They kept him, outrighted him, and he looked really good in that live BP. First 2 guys he faced were Austin Riley and Pablo Sandoval. He struck them both out. Got a good arm. Nice breaking ball. So it's another former third rounder from Vandy that the Dodgers took about 5 years ago. But so anyway, there are a lot of options is the thing. And there's also, they have a little more in camp than they might have normally because there's no minor league camp yet. It doesn't open until after this one's done. So they got some of those guys are in big league camp and there's close to 70 guys here, and they're getting a look at all these young guys, especially early. The main guys from the pen who've pitched so far have all looked good. The most important, I think, is Will Smith, obviously, because he's going to be the closer, it looks like, at least the primary guy. He came out the first day, his debut in the second game against the Red Sox, and looked really good. He pitched third game because he struck out Sano of the Twins with a nasty slider. The slider looks good, and last year that's what took so long to get him going because he missed summer camp. He didn't face anybody during the 3-month shutdown. Then he had COVID during the summer camp, misses the first 2 weeks of the season, and it took him a month really to get that slider going or close to it.
Yeah.
Right now it looks sharp, so I think that's it.
Usually guys don't lose their ability to spin the ball; they lose the velo. But there's no telling, man. There's no telling what you see guys all the time come off the DL and they struggle, and it takes some time to figure out what his routine was like and what he had to be doing. But that slider's been consistent his whole career, and anytime he's had that, whether he's 91 or 94, it's been a dominant pitch. So, you look at the pen, you got lefties that. Yep, you got 3 lefties that can get righties and lefties out, which is pretty rare. That doesn't happen too much. So, again, man, I feel good about the depth.
Both of those guys look good too. By the way, the first appearances, Matzik and Mentor.
Mentor's the one I want to see what Mentor does this year because I feel
he looked like it's just picking up on last year, right where you left off.
That confidence he's got to have after that playoff start. I think he's going to ride that all year.
The only one of the big 4 who hasn't pitched, and he pitches today against the Pirates of the bullpen, is Chris Martin. He goes against the Pirates today. And Jacob Webb, that's 5 right there.
Yeah.
Who've looked really good. So
Luke Jackson thrown yet?
Yeah, he struggled to his first couple of batters and then retired the next 3. So, he settled in, looked fine after that. Everybody's healthy. Nobody's been held back yet. I'm efforting to find out why Max Fried, I thought was going to start tomorrow. Right now it's listed as TBD for Friday. If I hear during this podcast recording what that is, I'll let you know. But the others of the opening day rotation is Charlie Morton, and he is going to start Saturday. It's going to be intriguing. He's going to start against his former team, the Rays, against Tyler Glasnow. So an appealing spring training matchup. The guy that somehow got overshadowed last year until he just made it impossible to not talk about him is another guy that's looked terrific in his debut this year. I think he might have had the best appearance so far, best start or appearance. Huascar Ynoa.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's going to have an impact this year, man. Whether it's him stepping into the rotation if somebody gets hurt, or as a long reliever, or he could do anything. He prefers starting, but he says he's comfortable going back and forth because he's done it since AA. But this is a guy that looks really good. He looked great against the Red Sox in his debut the other day. He got a start and pitched a couple of innings. And, I mean, you look at him and you go, if you didn't know, you would think he's their top pitching prospect.
That's what I was going to ask. You know, what was his prospect status coming up or his background being brought up? Because I don't know too much about that side of it. He just kind of popped onto the scene last year.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that, he signed with another team. He came over in a trade for 1 year for a couple of veterans. The catcher, Luke Recker. Remember Recker?
Mm-hmm. Anthony
Recker and not Luke Recker. Yeah, Anthony Recker and the little pitcher. I'll come up with it in a minute. But he came over in a trade and kind of slid in below a lot of the other top prospects, the homegrown prospects. But this year is the first year he's cracked any top 100s, and that's only because, I think it's Baseball Prospectus, the other ones don't allow guys who lose their rookie status to be prospects anymore.
Gotcha.
So he would have been on some other ones, but this is the first they do. So he's on theirs. But for instance, Keith Law has him as the Braves' 11th prospect, and he's behind 4 or 5 pitchers. So
he's only 22. I didn't realize that.
That's the thing. Yeah, you would think it's an older guy, and he's not. I mean,
because there's no hype, because there's no hype with him. You think he's kind of like a journeyman or something. I mean, that was kind of the view I had painted in my head, and I just looked him up. He's 22.
Legit. This guy is so confident. He's a horse out there, man.
That's the thing, though. The cool thing is, nobody in the clubhouse cares what your hype is, what your prospect status is, how much you're getting talked about. If he goes out and deals, he's going to get those opportunities.
And Snit doesn't care.
That one bit.
And Rick Kranitz doesn't care. Yeah, they don't care. Front office doesn't care.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares in the clubhouse. If you're getting outs, you're getting outs.
He's legit. He's going to be an impact. Mark it down, man. As far as bench candidates, we'll get back to in a second here. I'm going to give you a couple of things he said. Bench candidates. I've been impressed with a couple of these dudes. That Ihira Adrianza. I had heard really good things from people that cover the Twins about what he was. He was their main utility guy for a couple of years. Real versatile guy. He's looked really good. And Abraham Almonte, 31 years old. He's played for 5 teams in his 8-year career. He's his underwhelming stats in the majors, but a couple of things kind of stood out. He had 22 extra base hits and 194 PAs with Cleveland a few years ago. And last season, he split time with the Padres and the D-backs. And with the D-backs, he hit 290 with a 968 OPS in 38 plate appearances. I know, very small sample size, but he had 5 extra base hits. 5 extra base hits, including a triple and a homer. And he's shown something so far. He had a nice game the other day. Both those guys look like they could be strong candidates for bench jobs. It's not a given.
Hard.
Camargo will be there.
That's what I was going to ask.
It's not guaranteed contract, but I expect him to be.
He's ARB though, isn't he? Not yet.
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
He skipped ARB, so it's not they avoided arbitration with him a couple years.
But they want somebody that can back up at shortstop, and they're not. Yeah. They're not certain he's the guy, huh?
Exactly. He's got to show it this spring because that's important. That some of the other guys they brought in can do that. So that's going to be interesting to see. getting kind of the more pertinent stuff here, the guys you're going to see play every day or expect to at least. Christian Pache. There is no doubt in my mind at all that he's ready to unseat Ender and to start from day one. And for those people that are afraid, the Braves will manipulate service time, the only guy they've even done that with since Alex has been here was the big one, Acuna.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have argued, it wasn't a blatant one like it was with Chris Bryant. Acuna had roared through the minor league system. I mean, he didn't spend much time down there. And more importantly, they had a legit option for left field until they brought him up to keep him. And now everybody's glad they did, I'm sure, because they had him controlled for another year. Doesn't matter since they signed him long term, but they had him controlled for another year. Preston Tucker was the guy that they had seen in spring training and felt could handle that.
And he raked.
And he raked.
Yeah.
He raked. Almost right up until when he stopped raking,
like
it was time to bring Acuna up. So it worked out great. So
that sucks.
Yeah, it worked out great for the Braves. They got lucky or whatever, but they might have been forced to bring him up earlier if Preston Tucker would have fallen on his face. But bigger point is he's the only guy they've done that with. I mean, they could have done that with Soroka.
What they do with Soroka?
They brought him up from I think straight from Double-A to make that start against the Mets in May that year. They needed a starter, and we were all like, what? Soroka? They brought him up, just thrust him in there. You go, kid. And he got hurt that year and ended up having all that service time while he was on 60-day DL. That's why he was arbitration eligible this year.
Yeah.
Been hurt twice. So that was an obvious case where they said, if he can win this game, we want him up here. And they brought him up. And they've done that with a couple of other guys, too, that they started. And going back before Alex got here, obviously Jason Hayward, he started from day one. He started opening day.
And that mattered because we won the wild card on the last day of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think they're a team that's done that like other teams have. And Alex, I don't think, is really interested in that. I mean, they did it with Acuna for a reason. They knew he was special. And Pache's special too. But Pache gives them a lot better chance to win than Ender does. I really believe that. He's better now than Ender defensively. Ender slipped a little bit. Ender's still good. Pache could win a Gold Glove right away. And offensively, he's just head and shoulders above where Ender is now. Pache he had a home run robbed the other day against the Red Sox in his first game. Opposite field, right field. Dude goes up in right center gap, and they have a short fence. Jumps up, catches it with his glove 3 feet above the wall. There would have been an opposite field homer in his spring debut. And this kid he looks like a seasoned vet out there at this point. The experience he gained in that NLCS. Mm-hmm. I mean, he looked totally comfortable, I thought, in the NLCS.
That was what opened my eyes because, you hear the reviews and what people are saying about him, and there's questions about something is bad or whatever, and then you see him hit in the playoffs. And he had good at bats. Even when he got out, he was grinding out at bats, and maybe he ground out to shortstop, but it was a hard hit ground ball to shortstop. He hit a home run. I mean, pretty much
double.
Yeah, all his at bats, I was like, this dude's. I mean, he's competing. He doesn't look overwhelmed at all. And all the talk about him is his defense.
And he had almost zero experience.
Yeah.
In the big leagues before he's thrust in against the Dodgers and their pitching staff.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a hit and an RBI in each of his first 4 games. Mm-hmm. For each of his first 4 starts. Yeah, that. If you're Ender and you're watching that, you're going, because Ender's at home. They didn't even add him to the roster after Duvall got hurt. But you got to be watching that going, I'm done here.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was cool, though, because Pache gave him credit recently.
Yeah.
Said Ender's just been, gone above and beyond to help him out. And
yeah.
That says a lot about Ender.
Yeah.
I know people questioned some of his quotes before about him saying he should be playing and things like that. And that's just, for me, that's just the confidence you have to have. And some guys know not to say that stuff out loud and other guys just don't care. But Pache saying he's given him that much time and lended his time to somebody taking his job. If you're Ender, you see it. You see Pache coming, you hear all the noise about him, and to still go out of your way and help somebody take your job, man, that says so much about Ender and his character I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, and he hasn't stopped either helping him any way he can, telling him anything he can. And Ender says, I do that with all the young players. He goes, I love watching Pache play. He's going to be great. He's going to have a long career. He and he said that, when we asked about it, yesterday. I mean, he's still he knows he sees the writing on the wall, I think, but he says I'm going to always see myself as a starter. Once you think of yourself as a backup,
Yeah.
you can't do that. But he doesn't say anything about I think I deserve, nothing like that. He handled it with total class. I really admired how he handled it yesterday when we asked him some tough questions about it.
Not easy to do, and a lot of guys wouldn't. A lot of guys are they'll lie to themselves or just, it is a business, and guys will just focus on that side of it and not want to help a guy. But I think that's really cool he did that.
Asked him about being left off the postseason roster all 3 rounds, and he said, "I'm not going to lie, it was one of the roughest things I've dealt with as a professional ball player." He goes, "It was sad."
Yeah, it hurts.
Yeah.
That happened to me with the Mets, but I mean, I knew there was no shot.
Yeah.
I had like a 15 ERA there, and Terry Collins, he called me into the office, and like I was saying, some guys lie to themselves or they're not honest about it. Terry called me into the office, and I could see he was kind of trying to figure out how to word it, and I was like, "Terry, we're good." And he just kind of like, "Okay." He said, "We appreciate your efforts, but you could just go home." And I was like, "Yeah, well, good luck." Because
don't wait by the phone.
I found my World Series ring yesterday, and I was telling my buddy, I was like, "This thing just means nothing to me," because I contributed nothing. I wasn't there for the playoff run. It was probably the worst, I've ever pitched.
Yeah.
But I got this thing, But yeah, you got to be honest with yourself and just know, when you're struggling that bad. Ender knows his numbers. He's seen what he's done.
Yeah.
He knows he's struggled. But it takes certain guys, because other guys will lie to themselves. They'll think they're one at bat away, or they're getting screwed over by the team doesn't like them, and they'll just keep feeding themselves garbage and become a problem, and a distraction. So, I mean, hat tip to Ender for just, being a man about it.
I like William Contreras. I'm not going to lie, for the backup job over Alex Jackson. I just think I know a lot of people are predicting Alex Jackson because of the options, because of the defense. I think Alex Jackson might be slightly ahead of him behind the dish, but it's not enough of a difference to me to counter the huge advantage Contreras has hitting.
Yeah,
this guy can hit, man. He's another with the oppo power at such a young age. I mean, and interviewed him today on the Zoom, and he had his tight undershirt on. Dude is jacked, man. He's jacked.
Everybody's jacked now.
He works out with his brother. His brother, all-star catcher with the Cubs. He's 6 years old. He works out with him at home down here in Orlando in the offseason. I mean, his brother's taught him everything he knows about big leagues. That's what I asked him. What does your brother teach you? He goes, everything, So he knows what to expect. He doesn't look at all overwhelmed in there. He goes against the Red Sox the other day and hit an opposite field shot. He had 3 RBIs on a bases loaded walk and a 2-run single, and then he flew out to the right field wall, at the wall, and that was his 3 plate appearances in his first game of spring. And behind the dish, I mean, he looks fine. I mean, he might not win a Gold Glove, but he looks fine. He doesn't miss wild pitches, turn them into pass balls, that kind of thing, or he looks like he can handle the pitching staff. He made some progress in that department. And I mean, Drew Smiley pitched to him yesterday, and they looked really comfortable together. So I like him. I some people could say, you want Contreras to keep playing every day at AAA. If you think he's going to be maybe he'll replace d'Arnaud after this year, or they could re-sign d'Arnaud. But I don't think he's got anything else that he can really improve upon in AAA. More so, to me, being with d'Arnaud and Sal Fasano, especially, who might be the best catching coach in the major leagues. Being with those guys every day up here, because they have skull sessions before every game. They talk over hitters. They talk over everything. They share everything, techniques, everything. They work together. The catching units here really tight. I think he could get more out of that than playing every day in AAA. I really do.
Well, I think about it, and I think you can learn how to manage a staff. You can learn from people and do that. It's a lot harder to learn how to hit. If you've got that bat tool, you can teach a catcher, as long as, the defensive stuff like blocking, throwing guys out is solid. Being up in the big leagues, he can learn a lot from guys that have been around like d'Arnaud. And, if it was between the two guys, they're both young, but if it's between the two guys and one of them's Yadier Molina back there, then I think you got to start thinking about it and considering it. But if there's no drastic difference defensively, if it's just a small step down, why not take the bat?
Right. Now, if this was Shea Langoliers, was Alex Jackson.
Who's that?
If he was ready, I'd say him because he is that good defensively.
Yeah.
I mean, and he'd be, he could win some of the games, the 2 or 3 games, 2 games he played a week. He could win some of them or shut down the other team's defense at least or base stealing. He is that much better defensively. But Jackson's not. He's got a good arm, but so does Contreras.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them are pretty good behind the dish. Langoliers he is outstanding behind the dish. He just needs to keep working on the hit tool.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is Langoliers might be at AAA playing every day. So I don't know. I don't know how they're going to break it down. They've got 3 catchers now that are knocking at the door.
Well, they're pushing the season back too, so you don't even know really what's going to be happening, if it might be just an alternate site again.
Yeah, it's going to be alternate site to start out, yeah.
Yeah.
Langoliers is a little behind the others just, because he came from college ball and has only played 1 year of pro ball, but he isn't that far away either. And defensively, he hosed a guy the other day. It was like, wow, that arm is special. It's special. Snit told Sal, he said he's going to throw out the first guy faces, and it's just the other team's that's going to shut it down for the rest of the series. They're just going to stop running against this guy. So just needs to hit enough to get here. And he hit at Baylor. For what that's worth, he hit at Baylor. He had a 3-homer game in the NCAA tournament.
How's he hit? 4. How's he hit so far? I guess he didn't really. Was he? Yeah. He's
only played once. I haven't really seen him enough this spring to tell. He came on in his first pro season. He came on at the end of the year. He really did start hitting a lot better after struggling initially with the wood bat and all that. He really came on. So I'll be interested to see him get some more ABs this spring. It's hard to get all these guys AB with when you also got Darno to play enough to get him ready.
Yeah.
But fortunately, he doesn't need a whole lot. Darno
and they're doing these 7-inning games too, which I kind of understand, but at the same time, that's experience for these guys.
Yeah, they're going to go to 9-inning games on the 13th. So, but and they're not playing any B games.
They're not.
That hurts. That hurts. So that's why they're going to have inter squad games and that kind of thing. So, but Drew Smiley and Ian Anderson each made their spring debuts this week back to back, and each looked really good. 2 innings of work. Ian Anderson got out of a bases loaded 1-out jam. It had been 3 soft singles, nothing major at all, but he got out of that jam. That was impressive. And Drew Smiley, this dude, he struck out 14.35 per 9 innings last year. I mean, it was huge. It was like 4 more than he'd ever done in his career. So obviously this guy's figured some things out.
Yeah.
His whole approach, but he gets to his first inning of work. Gave up a hit, retires the next 3. Then the second inning comes out, strikes out the side. All 3 batters struck him out. I mean, I'm like, okay, now I see where what he was doing last year. He's got more than he throws plenty hard. 93, the velocity's right where it was last year. The breaking balls, really good.
Yeah.
And then it throws a cutter. And that's it. Those 3 pitches. He kind of junked the changeup, and when he did that, used those other pitches, the curveball, a lot more last year. It kind of took off.
Yeah, it's just a question of health. I mean, that's been his only holdup. But if you've got an elite breaking ball, man, especially left-handed with curveball, cutter, that combo's so tough. Hitters see spin, and the ball does 2 different things. I'm interested to see how he does, because I don't think if he stays healthy, and I'm not worried about him at all.
Yeah. That was one of those signings where people, because he was the first guy the Braves signed in the offseason, and might have been the first free agent pitcher. He signed 2 weeks into free agent.
Like $10 million, right?
$11 million. And people are going, Drew Smiley? Because they're not used to Drew Smiley, and he kind of did that out of the way last year for a Giants team where they were out of the race at that point.
Yeah.
And September, you look at his September numbers were terrific. In the 4 starts when he came back he had a lacerated index finger. Wasn't like an arm, wasn't an elbow, shoulder.
Lacerated
came back and he was
finger.
really good. And talked to him about that, because he's 31, and I think people look at it and expect him to, he's 31, he should have already had a career. But he missed 2 years in his prime, the 28 and 29 seasons with Tommy John. Took him 2 full years. Comes back in his age 30 season, really struggled. And he says he was just trying, that was his year, like a lot of guys, their second year. He was trying to get it back.
Yeah.
And he stunk, got released.
Stunk.
And with the Phillies late that year, he started to really pitch a lot better. And he said, I felt like I was turning the corner then. Giants took a gamble on him, signed him, and he really had to put together a good year. And now look at him. making $11 million, and he's in one of the best rotations in the league. And
which will help. That helps too. Being a little deeper in a rotation too.
Yeah. I mean, he might be the number 4 starter for this team.
Mm-hmm. So you're going up against lesser starters versus having to take on like Kershaw, Verlander. That helps.
Guy making $11 million starting that averaged 14 strikeouts per 9 innings.
Yeah, well, that's because Soroka and Fried are still pitching for free. Well, actually, no, they're starting to get paid now, but yeah, you can afford to do that when you got rookies just holding down the staff.
Ian Anderson's pitching for free.
For free.
Kyle Wright struggled a bit in his debut, but as Snit said, he almost assumes the guy, his first inning or his first outing is going to kind of he's going to be amped up, and he's going to have to just kind of get back to normal. So, and Kyle looked a lot better after, initially giving up some hips. We'll see. It wasn't, he's healthy. That's the only important thing is, I don't think Soroka's going to be ready for opening day because I don't think the Braves will push him. I think he could be if they wanted to push him, but they're not going to do that.
Why would you, though? Why push him?
Yeah. So I think the 5th spot's going to be between Wright and Bryce Wilson. But like I said,
Ynoa maybe.
Don't discount Ynoa, man. He's been the most impressive one so far. And they don't have to have him for middle guy in the pen. They got Tomlin. They got some other guys. They don't have to have him for that role. It might be more valuable put him as the 5th starter. Have Bryce Wilson or Kyle Wright as your if you want to have one more long guy. But I don't know that they're going to need another long guy in addition to Tomlin. But
the hard part is Ynoa's proved that he can handle it. You got to look into the mentality of guys, and sometimes that works against you, where they know they can jerk you around a little bit and throw you in that role and take you back out of it. It's a hard thing to prove. Who knows how Kyle would respond to that? You
don't know at all. You're right.
So it almost works against you in a sense that they know they can kind of just spot start him, throw him in the pen, throw him wherever they want, where he might not get that role even if he's pitching the best. But I think they'll take the best, whoever's throwing the ball the best.
Well, the good thing is this year, there is no doubt all those guys, those 6, 7, and 8 guys are going to get multiple starts.
Yeah.
Because the way they're going to handle the staff after last year, after nobody threw more than 60, 70 innings last year, most guys threw 30. Smiley threw 27. They're not going to push anybody beyond. So they're going to give extra rest whenever they can. Whenever a guy seems like he needs it or says he needs it, they're going to say, be honest, do you want an extra day? And they're going to plug one of those guys in and do it a lot during the season. So it's not going to surprise me if those 6, 7, and 8 guys, get 12 starts, 15 starts between them. Something like that, easily.
Young guys always have their ups and downs. They could hit a little lull and to come up with a phantom injury where they just give them 2 weeks off or whatever. But I think you're right. I think everybody will get their turn.
And Max always seems to have, something come up, some weird thing.
Blister.
Whether it's a blister, turned the ankle last year because he's really athletic.
Back.
A lot of
high torque delivery. He's puts a lot of effort into that throw. And I don't think he's maxing out, but it's just a real athletic delivery with a lot of moving parts.
So, one of those guys could end up making 10, 12 starts himself, So, and the good thing is they're not guys where you have to cross your fingers and go, I hope he's ready for this. So they've seen it. They saw Bryce Wilson outpitch Clayton Kershaw. They saw Kyle Wright pitch great down the stretch, and then in his first couple of big postseason starts.
It's a good problem to have. I mean, it's tough. It's tough for guys coming up trying to establish themselves, being on, if you're on the Marlins or the Orioles or something right now, and you're any of those guys, you have a guaranteed lockdown spot. But this team's trying to win a World Series.
There's a couple of camps where he'd break camp as a third or fourth starter.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind.
He'd get a shot.
And then Wright and Bryce Wilson could easily be in 10 other teams' rotations, at least.
That's a tough break, man. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you got to think about the value of being on a winning team and everything, but I think probably Kyle's the guy that it hits the hardest, not being able to pitch consistently and have that role. Because he's kind of gotten into that here we go again mindset. Maybe not with him, but you feel that way watching him. Like if he has a bad start, how's he going to bounce back from it?
And he's not 21 either.
No, he's a little older than the other guys.
They have. It's a good problem to have. You're right. It's I think for them though, what might help is that they look at the long term and they know Charlie Morton and Drew Smiley are on 1-year deals.
1-year deals, yeah.
There's going to be 2 spots next year, and if they show this year they're ready for it. The Braves don't have to go out and get another experienced guy. They're not going to need to go out and get another experienced guy next year if they don't want to. Max Fried's going to be that guy. Soroka's going to be that guy. So this was the year where they had to do that to make sure they didn't end up like they did last year. But if these guys pitch well this year, they're not going to need to do that. You can spend that money elsewhere next year.
Yeah, they had to hedge their bet a little bit. But, if you're those guys, something always comes up, like we're talking about. Fried has a blister, and you got to be ready to max out on that opportunity. Yeah. And, the team's not in a position where you get to come up and have 2 or 3 bad starts. If they call a guy up and he gets crushed, he's going back to Gwinnett or alt site, whatever it is. So that's a little added pressure for him, but that's the game, man. That's the game. You have to come up and get it done, and nobody feels sorry for you.
And that depth is never going to be more important than it is this year, not just because of what we just cited, the lack of innings last year, but this NL East, you can't afford to run somebody out there that you're not comfortable with because every game's going to matter. Without the expanded playoffs, you're going to have the 3 division winners, 2 wild cards from the NL. This division, it's going to be hard to be second place and be one of the wild card teams because these teams are going to beat each other up. I could see one wild card coming from the Central, and I could definitely see either the Padres or the Dodgers being the other wild card.
Well, it's guaranteed coming from the West, right?
Guaranteed.
It has to be.
They're going to beat up the other teams in that division.
Both those teams are going to playoffs.
Yeah, they're going to beat. There's some decent other teams out there, but not good. They're going to beat them up.
No, they're going to.
Both those teams are going to win 95 to 102 games, I think,
in one division.
So there's one of the wild cards.
Yeah.
I think the other will be from the Central. It'll be hard to be the wild card from the East unless a couple of these teams just, have injuries and fall apart. Unless the Mets it up again.
Which, you can never count that out.
But on paper, I don't see a wild card coming from the NL East, even though they might have 3 of the best 8 teams in the league.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes it hard because you all beat up on each other.
That's why you wish they'd have the expanded playoffs if you're the Braves this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that
more so if you're the Mets or the Nationals.
Mets or Phillies or Nationals.
Yep.
You're looking at it like, you got to get past the Braves. I think, they went a game away from World Series last year. They got to be the big dogs in everybody's mind, but.
And the Marlins went to the playoffs last year. They were the only other team in the division that went.
Yeah.
And they got all those starters back. And Sixto Sanchez is the betting favorite to win NL Rookie of the Year when the odds came out the other day. I like Ian Anderson's chances. I like Pache's chances. Those 2 were in the top 4, I think. Top 5 or top 6, something like that. Anyway, Ian was like 4th. Pache wasn't far behind him.
Well, for me, he was the most impressive rookie pitcher I've seen in probably 5 or 10 years. The way he came up and pitched in huge situations at tough teams, Red Sox, Yankees.
Yep.
And it's the same thing I was talking about with Jacob Webb. He never looked uncomfortable. He never looked overwhelmed. Playoffs, he looked good. He could easily win the Rookie of the Year.
Bryce Wilson outpitched Clayton on the big stage in the NLCS. But, man, we can't forget that first game, Ian Anderson comes up. Game gets rained out the day before, so he's got to sit around and all that until it gets rained out.
It sucks.
Come back the next day, pitching a doubleheader against Garrett Cole. Mm-hmm. And took a no-hitter to the 6th inning. Outpitched Garrett Cole in a win. He showed some balls that day. And then each game, next day he's starting at next game starting at Fenway Park, the place he used to go to games as a kid growing up in upstate New York. Pitched great there. Yeah.
Playoffs, he's got that benefit of no fans last year, kind of getting settled, knowing he could pitch in the league. That's going to help him a lot.
The first 3 playoff starts, he didn't give up a run.
Yeah.
The only runs he gave up were 2 against the Dodgers. And even in that game, he looked good after the way he got through the innings.
Best offense you're going to face. You're not going to face a better offense than that. And he held his own.
And it was Game 7, and the Dodgers were cranking at that point. They got warmed up as that series went along.
And they'd already had a look at him, right?
Yeah.
He'd already pitched.
That was the second start in the series.
Yeah.
Yep. Talking to Drew Smiley after his start yesterday, when he came out and gave up a hit right off the bat, and then he seemed like he settled down and pitched great. I asked him, and he said I felt a little out of sync out there, but I felt like I made a big adjustment first inning to second inning. So that's nice to know that first time out, I'm able to feel where I might be off on my mechanics and make that in-game adjustment and go right back out there. I was most excited about that today. But this whole spring, I felt great. I feel like I have a really good idea of the type of pitcher that I am. It takes a long time for a lot of guys to figure it out. You know, the game's always evolving, so you have to keep trying to make adjustments. But I feel like I'm in a really good place of just how to pitch and how to attack hitters. I'm just trying to carry that over from last season. So he sounds like a guy, you might, like a 25-year-old might sound like, It's just taking him a while to figure things out, but it feels like he is now, and he's a different guy than he was most of his career.
Well, there's also, it's a different aspect trying to grade pitchers now on their past history, because all this stuff's evolved so much in the last 4 or 5 years. Like Garrett Cole, you would have never thought Garrett Cole was going to turn into the pitcher he turned into. And guys get one simple suggestion from, based off of the spin feedback or different analytics now, that there's a lot of guys that things click later, because we were taught to pitch so much different coming up. It was all down in the zone. You had to establish your fastball, and teams have just kind of said, the numbers say you should throw 75% sliders, and they'll allow a starter to do that now, where that would have been so frowned upon, and you wouldn't even gotten the shot to do that before, because everybody was so dead set in a certain way that you were supposed to pitch. So there's going to be guys like Drew Smiley that learn, I'm supposed to throw my fastball up in the zone and throw my curveball off it. And that's something that, it takes time, because you'd never worked on that in your career before. And it's an adjustment of, that's just not how I was taught to pitch. And now all of a sudden this is okay. And you get better at doing it, and you see the results, on that big league level. So I think you're going to see a lot of guys that seem like late bloomers now that are really just kind of the technology's catching up with them.
You think some of these pitchers, now that they have the analytics and the super slow-mo and the Rhapsodo and all that they can go to him and go, look, you don't need to throw that changeup. Here's the spin rate on your curveball and your cutter. I mean, this is why you should be throwing these pitches. They're elite. And then mentally a guy goes, yeah, that makes sense, and does it. And hey, that worked great.
All the time. Yeah. But before, you had to rely on a catcher to tell you that.
Yeah.
Because you could throw a pitch warming up in the pen and you think it's nasty because it's moving a ton, right? Or it's doing what you're thinking is good. And then you got to rely on the hitters to kind of give you that feedback. And then you try to work on it. You're thinking, I got to throw this changeup. That's my weakness. But if you had a good catcher, like for me throwing to David Ross and McCann, that changed the trajectory of my whole career. I mean, I could have been out of the game in a year if I didn't come over to the Braves. But they gave me that feedback of, hey, this pitch is so good. That pitch sucks. Stop throwing that. And now everybody has that, in a different sense, but they have that available to them with the technology telling them that. So if you're with a team that's rebuilding and you're throwing to some catcher that's trying to figure out how to call games and doesn't really know what good stuff is, you might not get that feedback 10 years ago. But now you got a whole team of analytics people that'll break down, hey, like with Garrett Cole, they said, you need to scrap that two-seamer. Yeah. Your four-seamer has this spin rate. You throw it at the top of the zone. And like I said, it's not what you're taught, so it's hard to trust it. But you go out and throw it, and all of a sudden he's winning Cy Youngs and getting 300 mil. I think a lot of guys, they'll have that same, that just they'll make those same changes now and see those results.
For people that maybe don't realize how many guys he struck out last year, his strikeout rate per 9 innings last year was higher than Nick Anderson's.
Smiley, we're talking about, right?
Yeah, Smiley's was 14.35. Nick Anderson's was 14.33, the best reliever in baseball. Glasnow was 14.28. Jacob deGrom was 13.76, and the two Cy Young Award winners, Bieber was 14.20, and Trevor Bauer was 12.33.
So think about how dominant Kimbrel was in his prime. Those guys are striking out more than he was.
Right?
I think he was mid-13s or 14 all the time. I mean, he was pissed. Mm-hmm. We'd give him crap if he came in and didn't strike out the side, and his face would turn red, because he was so used to striking everybody out. But having a starter that can do that's wild, man. Yeah,
he didn't have the enough innings to qualify for the rankings because of that missed 5.5 weeks. But I looked at it, and among pitchers who faced more than 110 batters last year, the only pitcher with a higher K rate per 9 innings than Smiley was Freddie Peralta, the Brewers, 14.42. That was it. So
that is insane numbers.
He also had career best in lowest opponent's batting average, 198, OBP 261, slugging 297, and OPS was 558. So when this guy was pitching last year, he was dominating.
I'm trying to look back at his numbers right now and see, because he came up pretty good. That's just the adjustment I'm talking about, though. Is if you make one little adjustment and all of a sudden he can ride it into a whole new career.
Yeah. Throwing his curveball more frequently than he ever did. 4 September starts after return from the injured list. 4 September starts. He had 31 strikeouts and 5 walks in 18 innings in those 4 starts. A couple of them were short because he, wasn't built up.
Yeah. I mean, he really made some adjustment, though, because he was striking out 8, 9, 8, 9. And then all of a sudden he jumped up to 14.4.
And this is 2 years after, in 2019, after he'd missed 2 years with Tommy John. In 2019, he had a 6.24 ERA and gave up 32 homers in 114 innings.
Ouch.
And now look what that's got an 8-figure salary.
Yeah, overnight. Rich Hill did that. I mean, I remember Rich Hill was kind of just bouncing around, journeyman and everything, and then he finally got that rein to just throw that curveball. And it's crazy because Rich Hill pitched against us when I was an A-ball. He pitched a rehab start, and he was throwing this curveball that guys they couldn't touch it, and they'd never seen it. And every single guy was saying that's the best curveball I've ever seen. Granted, they're A-ball guys, and they're seeing a big league curveball.
Right.
But even Rich Hill's a good example that he never got free rein to just spin as many curveballs as he wanted until he was about 36, 37 years old. And he's pitched another 4 or 5 years after that.
Yeah, there are some late bloomers, man.
Yeah.
Asked him about, the first week or 2 weeks in camp with all these guys, and he said, it's been amazing. Because obviously this is a very young, energetic team. And you've got so much talent around you everywhere you look. The coaching staff's been amazing. He said, I love working with Rick Kranitz. He said he has that old school vibe. He's been around and seen a lot, so I really enjoy working with him. I'm real excited to get to the season with this club. Kranitz, I think the Braves have a really good mix here of they got an old school guy like Kranitz who believes in all the personal relationships and talks, with the guys. And he's, it just comes across that way. But they have all the new age analytics too. The guys have access to that information, but it's not forced down their throats. It's all there, and they got guys that can give it to them in a way. They let the coaches do that. They don't send the numbers crunchers out there to give it to the pitchers and go, Here you go. They give it to the coaches and let them do it in a coach speak, or in the tone that they're used to. So it's not intimidating, or it's not get that out of my face, And I think they just got a really good mix of that with this old school coaching staff, and trust those guys to give the players what they need, individual players, with the analytics they think will help them, and it's really worked so far for them.
Well, there's so many coaches that are threatened by the analytics, and it does. I mean, it is threatening because it makes them less valuable, their experience less valuable. But the sweet spot is a coach that's been around and can give you those tips, like that tip I like from Leo Venzoni, talking about superpower. Pitchers get in this trouble, you try to do too much, and that's when you get lit up. But there's coaches that have that side of it locked down. If they embrace the analytics and they can give you kind of both pieces of the puzzle, those are the ideal coaches. You got Seitzer that played in the big leagues. You got Wash. You got a lot of good coaches that have been around and they know the baseball side of it, not just the computer side of it. And they're able to translate it because they're great communicators. So they're able to translate it to any pitcher and find a way to get it to them without, being threatened by it like some of these coaches are. That you see these battles every day online or wherever it is. Everybody's just at each other's throats over analytics, whether it's good or bad for baseball. And if you find the coaches that have been around that can just take a step back and be like, this shit's obviously good look around the game at the changes that are happening. I think the Braves have that perfect sweet spot of coaches with the experience that also embrace the new age stuff.
They got a couple of guys in their mid-60s, and Snicker and Wash. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ron Washington could have said, you don't need to tell me where to position infielders. I know where the infielders go. But he didn't. So he does all his drills that he created some of them. He's out there doing these drills with guys. But at the same time, he understands why these analytics work as far as placement, and it's worked. I mean, the Braves, a lot of times you'll see a ball hit, and this is other teams too. They're all using the analytics. But the Braves, I don't know how many times I've seen a ball hit a line drive at the middle. It's a base hit, but Dansby's right there. Boom, double play. So, I mean, Wash has embraced all that, but not let it affect how he coaches his guys. Because with him, personal relationships are the most important thing. Getting those guys to trust him. And that's why they end up being out there doing these one-on-one drills every day. Every day. Before games. And even Freddie started doing that with him last year, Turns into gold gloves for guys,
Well, he's fun to work with, too. I mean, give me a chance to hang out with Wash anywhere, and I'll do it. You get to go out on the field and take some of his knowledge. I mean, guys are excited to work with Wash and be around him.
So we got it's going to be an interesting a couple of weeks down here in the next, because they got some decisions to make with the bench, with the bullpen, last spot in the rotation, with the backup catcher. I mean, it's not just it seemed like it was almost last year. Almost everything was decided at spring before we even got to spring training. That's not the case this year. Even though they had, they went further than ever in the postseason, you would think it would bring the whole team back. And they brought the important parts back for the most part. But they got a chance to, I think they could even be better in a couple of those spots where everybody thought was going to be weaknesses. Everybody's like, oh, the bench is weak. I don't necessarily think so. And if it is, they got enough, they've set enough aside. I mean, damn, the payroll is like $20 million less than it was a year ago, man. So they've got some money they can spend during the season if they need to. So there's no doubt in my mind Alex Anthopoulos won't, and he won't even wait to the trade deadline if he has to.
Those are the guys that are available too. Without breaking up your whole farm, you can get a reliever, you can get a bench
Shane
guy.
Green's still unsigned.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, if they're probably just waiting on his number and he's waiting to try to get it, but they can play a stalemate because they don't need him.
But they want him. They've got a couple of guy positions where they are now lined up where they weren't a few years ago, catching, obviously, because it was only a couple of years ago. The Braves had no catching depth in the minor league system. Right. Now they've got the three that we just talked about, with Contreras, Jackson, and Shea. So that's and then behind them you got a couple more, but you can't keep all those guys. So you could use one of those guys in a trade piece, but more importantly, you got outfield depth now. And we've seen that in spring training because I tell you, everybody thinks, it's just a given that the major league outfielder for the long term is obviously two of those spots are set for the next decade with Ozuna, Pache. But everybody shouldn't just assume Drew Waters. It's just a matter of time before he's in one of those spots because, they keep waiting for him to make more contact, cut down the swing and miss. But in the meantime, you got a couple of guys that are coming up. And they're getting better and better. And the guy that's really stood out in the first week of camp is Michael Harris. This kid doesn't turn 20 for another few days. He's 19 years old, but he was in camp last year at 18. He played in that inter-squad scrimmage that they had. And even then he looked like he belonged. And at the first of the year, Markakis was down at the alternate site, getting ready after he opted out and came back in. The guy he came back raving about to Snit was this Michael Harris kid. He's from Henry County, outside Atlanta, same place Jason Hayward was from, Henry County. And I tell you what, man, you watch this guy on the field, and he looks special out there. He has fast twitch muscles, and he can hit. He's got a hitting approach now that looks like 10 years beyond his years. He's got power to the opposite field. He drives the ball over the place, and he had an at-bat yesterday. He got down 1-2 in a count. Fouls back 3 straight pitches. I mean, he's in there looking like he's trying, those guys that can do that can foul back pitches until they see one. He's doing that. And he ends up, and then he takes two balls. He works a count full. He ends up hitting a hard grounder, grounding out. But he got back to the dugout. Everybody was patting him on the butt and shaking his hand. I mean, this kid hasn't turned 20 yet, and he can go get it in the outfield. He's got a good arm. And the other one is another kid from, he's not a kid really anymore. He's early 20s, but Trey Harris. Another of these guys that gets totally overlooked because he wasn't a top prospect, wasn't a bonus baby, low-round draft pick, played at Mizzou, played college ball, didn't get drafted early at all, and he does nothing but keep hitting everywhere he goes. And as Snit said, he's a moose. This guy is He's not real tall, but he's got a body that's kind of a little chunky, but he's strong as a bull, man. And this guy can hit. He's hit everywhere he's been, and he's another one that's continues to open eyes. Last year in camp, and all through the alternate site, and again in spring training this year. So that's two. But I really like Michael Harrison. He's not a top 100 prospect yet, but he should be. I think he should easily be. And I'll be shocked if he doesn't move into those midseason lists with people that are more buzz is created about this guy. Because to me, there's no real weaknesses in this kid's game.
Yeah, well, those prospect lists, they're based off of tools and they're not based off of how you're playing the game yet when you're that young. They're based off of you have a 80 grade arm or you got this crazy pop that everybody's trying to project. But guys that are actually learning to play the game, even if their ceiling's a little lower,
yeah.
And if you got big leaguers raving about him, if you got a guy, Markakis coming down and saying, this is the guy I'm really noticing, nobody cares in the big leagues. AA doesn't care. SNIT doesn't care. If you could play, you're getting your shot. So, I mean, I've heard so much about Drew Waters, but to hear you say that, you're just as impressed with these other guys, it's just the depth is getting insane.
Well, let's put it this way. In the first 4 or 5 games of camp, we've seen 19-year-old Michael Harris out there more than we've seen Drew Waters.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about.
Snit wants to see him play.
They don't care how good you're supposed to be. They watch you play the game, exactly. And they say, this guy, I wasn't a prospect coming up, but all of a sudden I was getting called over to big league camp, and you pitch and you throw in a game and you do really well and you impress the right people. They don't care what Baseball America says about you. They want to see you again.
Yeah, and I'm not dismissing Drew Waters at all because the kid has tools out the ass, man. There's no doubt. But you got to start hitting at some point. I mean, swing and miss is a problem for an outfielder. Unless you're going to hit 40 bombs, you can't strike out 150 to 200 times if you're not hitting for a lot of power. Especially if you got another guy that is putting the ball in play. I mean, they want guys that'll put the ball in play if they can have them. And
that prospect status and your tools, that just buys you time.
Yeah.
At some point you gotta get it done.
And if you didn't play, in East Cobb, or you didn't play in the area code games, and you didn't get on the radar while you were in high school, sometimes it takes a few years for you to catch up with those guys if you're just doing it through the minor league system and all that.
Status wise, yeah.
Yeah. People don't want to give up on the status guys once they built them up. They're like, give them benefit of the doubt. Whereas the other guys have to keep proving it. They have to keep proving it until they force their way on the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
This kid is forcing his way on the list.
Yeah. But those are the guys that I always respect those guys even more because they earned it.
So does Snit. He loves those guys because that's the kind of guy he was. He never made it, but he was a double-A catcher, worked his ass off, He likes those guys like Trey Harris that just keep defying the skeptics. They don't listen to people saying, oh, you're all right, kid, but you're never going to amount to much. They just keep going out and saying, all right, watch me,
Yeah, that's just part of, when you're coming up, stay in your own lane and just put your head down and go to work and not worrying what people are saying about you.
So, by the way, Ozzie Albies hit a 4th inning leadoff homer yesterday off right-hander Dylan Tate, and he crushed it. He looks as shredded. Typically, he's always. I mean, this guy has no body fat. He looks great. The guy that really has stood out condition-wise is Ronald Acuna. Not that he was in bad shape before, because he wasn't. He was in good shape, and he could fly.
Yeah.
He comes into camp, though. Smith says he thinks he's lost a lot of weight. He looks like he's lost about 10 pounds maybe, but it's noticeable, man. I mean, he's got a washboard stomach now. He's wearing the pant legs rolled up to his knees. He cut the hair, he doesn't have any hair hanging out of the helmet, so he looks even lighter that way. But he hits a leadoff double the other day against the Red Sox. And never slowed round in first, even though it should have been a single. Most everybody else would have been a single. He never slowed.
Got thrown out. I saw that.
And he risked. He forced Martinez to make a great throw, and he rushed it. And he made a pretty bad throw. But then there's a single to left.
He keeps going.
He scores from second. Never slowed down.
Yeah. He
was like, I want everybody to say I'm ready. It was like a horse that had been all winter, not running. And here you go. Go get him, kid.
Yeah.
It was impressive. And he looks ready. I mean, Acuna, we keep saying it, but if Acuna stays healthy this year, man, I mean, he's put up great numbers without being healthy a lot of times. Played with a hurt wrist last year most of the year. He could
Who knows how banged up he was last year, and how much he let on.
Anyway, we keep waiting for Acuna and saying, not waiting because he's had great numbers even when a little banged up. But if I'm thinking about that guy's healthy all year, that wrist is fine. This could definitely be the 40-40 year that, because he's going to have to do it while he's young, I think. He's going to stop running so much at some point.
But he's so young. And,
he is so young.
He's so young.
He might have a few 40 years in it.
You never know. But you talk about guys, and I think the interesting thing with him coming in, maybe he did that for a reason, maybe he didn't. But look how hard he plays. An extra 10 pounds, whatever he lost. I mean, that can extend his career down the road, but it can also just get him through the season feeling better. I think every guy kind of goes through stages early in their career where they find their ideal weight. And, big thing in baseball right now is bulking up and putting on all this muscle, but power's not a question for him.
Yeah.
So if he can hit opposite field home runs at, 190 or whatever he is versus 205, what's the difference? But if he feels better moving around.
Yeah. Yeah, because that pace power comes from those wrists, man, and those hips. It's not coming from
he doesn't need
biceps
that
and chest.
No, it's all leverage. It's a swing.
You look at him. Maybe he looks at a guy like Tatis and goes,
"Yeah, Tatis ain't big.
He's slender." Mm-hmm. So, but anyway,
Tatis has as much power as anybody too.
Yeah, exactly. He hits him a ton, man. Just anybody that's read though, because I think they get worried when they hear that a guy lost weight in the offseason. They're like, "Oh no, he didn't need to lose weight. This is good weight, man. This is weight he did not need. He wasn't heavy at all, but you can tell the difference.
Yeah,
you can tell the difference." And this looks like the right weight for him. We'll see, but it doesn't look. He's not thin at all. Where you go, I don't know if he can hold up. It's not like that.
Didn't look frail. He's just more shredded.
No, not at all. He looks every bit as big, in the arms and all that.
His legs. His legs are where his power's at. That lower half firing before his hands. He gets so much leverage.
But he was flying around the bases the other day. Flying.
He's feeling good.
Yeah. So my picks to click this year. A healthy Acuna, I think Ozzy's going to just have a monster year. Because if you look at Ozzy's numbers last year, in his 5 weeks, when he came back, his numbers are off the charts, man. And this guy's healthy. We forget how good he was that first year when he made the All-Star team and hit, 19 homers, 20 homers at the break?
Yeah.
People forget Ozzy because there's so many other guys on his team. There's Freddie and Acuna fighting for MVP maybe this year. Ozzy's a guy we shouldn't forget about. He could have a big year. Just stay healthy. That's all it is with him.
Yeah, and you just like we were talking about, you never know what he was playing through, and that hurts you. There's so many guys that don't play unless they're 100%, and they just always put up these perfect numbers, and everybody loves them. The guys that play through a little injury and maybe they hit 260 for a month, your teammates respect that a ton, and your organization sees it. But a lot of that stuff never makes its way out into public. But Ozzy being 100%, if you're battling a wrist injury as a hitter, man, that's crippling. Yeah. He couldn't hit from one side of the plate or whatever it was. But you're right. If he was in any other organization, he'd be their future superstar. He'd be on all their billboards. But he's just got to get in line, Atlanta.
Yeah. Yeah. To their credit, those three guys, Freddie, Acuna, and Ozzy, they play through injuries, and they never want to come out of the game.
Yeah.
Ozuna back, and from day one, the personality is just it's bubbling over, and the teammates are so happy that he's back that they re-signed him. To a man, every guy said that was all offseason. That was the one glaring piece that we had to have back to get back where we were last year and further. We had to have Marcel. So when he signed late, everybody was just like, all right, now let's get to spring training, because it wasn't until February. But
I couldn't believe the Braves risked it too. Maybe they were just in the conversation the whole time, but
I think they always felt like he'd give him a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the only that was the only reason that Alex went looked into trading for some other guys, signed some other guys. All just along, he knew that Ozuna wasn't going to be like all of a sudden, well, sorry, I signed with Tampa Bay. I think he knew Ozuna wanted to be in Atlanta. So he'd at least give him a chance to match any offer he got. So and they would have too, I think.
I think that's what I was trying to figure out. If he got 5 years, 125 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd have gone that high, but I think they were pretty comfortable.
What was the threshold?
That we'll match any offer that he gets, and we don't have to beat any offer. We just have to come close to matching, and he'll come back.
Yeah.
He wanted to be back. wasn't going to go to the Marlins in Tampa, the only two teams closer to his house in Miami.
Yeah.
So, and he loves this. He loves this team. He loves all these guys. You know, they all fit together. They're like brothers, man.
Yeah.
Especially the young Latin guys with him, but they all love him. Dansby loves him. Freddie they all love him. So
he's a bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. People that somebody said on Twitter, I think Acuna is, that Ozuna is like Freddie is personality with the Latin guys. I'm like, no, Ozuna's like that with everybody. Yeah. Everybody loves Ozuna. It's just the Latin guys have him as, you know, they just love hearing the salsa music and hearing a guy speak their language and be loud in the clubhouse. But all the guys love Ozuna. And he plays his music and they all smile. So, yeah.
If you do it right, man, you could play any music you want. If you got this teammate you love and you see him going to his vibe and he's having a great time, like everybody will jump on that bandwagon. But it's great for those young guys to have a dude as established as him to look up to.
Yeah, I think he's their big poppy. I think he's this team's big poppy. But there's only some guys that could have these loud personalities and not annoy guys.
Well, you got to be carrying your weight too.
Yeah.
You can't be a bench guy coming in. I mean, some bench guys can impact the clubhouse, but if you want to be ski guys like that, but because his personality was above and beyond anything you're going to come across.
Kevin Millar was like that. He started, but he was a guy that could get away with being annoying. He didn't annoy his teammates. They loved him.
Yeah.
You know, but always be on, always be loud. So
it's a lot to handle. And if it's, if it's not, if you don't play it right, you're just annoying. But especially, you hit 30 homers a year. It's everything you do is a little bit cuter.
When the Braves had Donaldson, I remember asking Flowers about him because his personality, he was.
It's loud.
He was on everybody, always. And I asked Flowers, I said, so he's good to have in the clubhouse, huh? Yeah. How about if there were a couple of him? Because no, you don't want two, just one. But he's good.
Yeah. You kind of got you got to have the right mix. You got to mix in everything to get through the season and have fun. But
the funny thing was when they had him, the guy next to him was Charlie Culberson. They couldn't be more different. Yeah. But Charlie loved him too. Charlie kind of shake his head, but he goes because he was so different than Charlie in every way. But they were lockers beside each other. It's funny.
Well, it's hard to have those clubhouses that you have to conform to, too. That everybody does a certain thing. And you walk into some of these clubhouses, it's like a library. You know, it's a long season. It's July and it's dead quiet and everybody's just punching the clock. I mean, it's miserable. Yeah. You get these loud guys in the clubhouse and they balance out a guy like Charlie or Markakis that's quiet, and then all of a sudden you got all these different pieces that are contributing their little thing to the mix.
Yeah.
It's fun. I mean, that's how you get through it.
Freddie said Ozuna, and then especially when Sandoval was on the team at the end of the year, he said it was a blast. He goes, Sandoval's in the middle of the clubhouse. He just joined the team at the end of the year. He's in the middle of the clubhouse dancing.
Yeah.
Pablo Sandoval, he doesn't care. He's comfortable. No. Look at what he's done in his career. He's like, and everybody loved it. So he said, it was special. So getting Ozuna was back was in so many ways, on the field, obviously, but. And Freddie talked again about that, having Ozuna behind him, and he explained it beautifully. Freddie had like a 30-minute interview the other day that was terrific. He was talking about his two new kids, one being born by surrogate, one being born by his wife, everything. But he was talking about Ozuna, and he said the important thing, I've told you guys, the important thing wasn't necessarily that I got more pitches to hit. He goes, it's that they never hardly ever bring in a left-hander with Ozuna hitting behind me. So I got more chances to face. That was the key, having that protection behind him, that right-handed hitter like Ozuna. But
you forget what an impact that, and that's why managers were so against that 3-batter minimum because it makes their job so much harder. But you don't, if you got a lefty reliever with a decent breaking ball and you want to have him battle against Freddie and feel like you might get a pop out or something like that, and then he's got to face Ozuna after that, he's staying in the pen.
Yeah. All right. Well. All right, this is the first of our weekly we'll do for rest of spring training. Then we'll move up to 2-a-days. But we appreciate everybody on board with us. It's going to be fun, man. I like this team again.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not?
As long as they stay healthy. All right, like every team, except maybe the Dodgers.
Got some depth.
They just go out and buy another piece.
Yeah.
All right, 7:55 is real. We're out. We'll talk to y'all next week.